Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Where Will Network Equipment Provider Revenue Come From in the Next 5 Years? I'm Allison Crawford, and I'm hosting today's webinar. This webinar will assess how diversification into IT and the introduction of SDN and NFV will impact business models and revenues, and how NEPs plan to adjust to stay relevant as their industry undergoes transformational changes. Before I pass this over to Chris, there are a few introductory information items I'd like to cover. First, recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Chris will address them at the end of the presentation. Or, if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to Chris at the end of the webinar to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides, as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight, and we'll share all the social media links with you again at the end of the presentation. Now let me introduce Chris Antlitz, analyst on the networking mobility team here at TBR. Chris has been covering the telecom market for the past 6 years and guides our research on telecom vendors. His insight into the telecom market, business models, and vendor and operator strategies have helped our clients improve their strategic go-to-market plans and improve performance. And with that, let me hand this over to Chris.
Thanks, Allison, and welcome everyone. So before we jump into the material, I just want to give an overview of the networking and mobility practice here at TBR. Just to kind of frame what kind of research we do here and where these numbers are coming from. So we do the operator research, and then we also do in-depth coverage of the vendors. On the operator side, we do extensive modeling of CapEx and OpEx. We also do reporting on individual operators, what their strategies are, metrics, across a variety of different areas. We're covering them. On the vendor side, we look at the telecom vendors, which we'll be focusing on today. And we also have an emerging research area for the enterprise networking vendors and looking at what enterprise customers are purchasing for their networking needs. So a little bit deeper on the telecom vendors, we are tracking the services, equipment, and software lines of business on a global basis for all the major vendors, and we do a variety of benchmarking, margin analysis, syndicated reports, which we do on a quarterly basis on Tier 1 vendors, and a list of those vendors is on the bottom right-hand side of the slide, and a list of some of the benchmarks and other reports that we do are listed on the left side of the slide. And we also do a variety of custom research to client specs, whatever they need in these areas. So every quarter, the analysts in the group get together and we discuss major topics that are coming up in the industry. And we make a big list of them, and then we identify which ones are the most important. And we shortlist those, and we focus on those topics, and they drive our research agenda for the quarter, or several quarters if it's a long-term topic, something that's unfolding over many quarters. So for this presentation, our deep research into NFV, LTE, ICT are all drivers that enabled us to create this presentation and to get some of these numbers. So with that, we'll jump right in to the material. By the way, this is based off of a special report we put out a few months ago, and this is the executive summary, if you will, of that report. If you want that report, we can make that available to you. Just reach out to us. So there's an inflection point taking place in the market. This is something we've seen unfolding over the last few years, and essentially what's happening is that there is slowing spend on telecom equipment, and there is growing spend on software and services. And what's happening here is that operators are shifting their spend pattern. They are shifting it towards purchasing more software and services to help them with consolidation, new business model implementation, and OpEx reduction. And this has implications for the network equipment providers because the equipment is their core business, and that's what they're very good at. So what we're seeing is a transformation taking place here. NEPs are starting to adapt to these spend shifts among their core customers. And what is happening from a high level is that they are accelerating more into software, services, and IT to jumpstart their growth. So this spending shift among operators requires a new strategy for network equipment providers. We are seeing three main strategies unfolding in the market. The first thing is moving into IT. And by IT, we're talking about the data center specifically. That is where there is a lot of opportunities for NEPs to grow their revenue. Second is investing in software and services. Third is focusing on a primary domain at the convergence of these trends. So a short way of saying that is specializing and focusing on that part of the market where this convergence is taking place and specializing and serving niche markets. And we'll unpack each of these as we go along. Now, of the main vendors, they are employing one or more of these three strategies. And we'll highlight those as in the later slides. So the first thing, moving into IT. Remember, we're talking about data centers specifically. So NEPs are starting to branch out of their core network market, and they're capitalizing on opportunities from the convergence of network and IT technologies. So what we're showing here is two pie charts. This is total revenue for the Tier 1 vendors split by network-related revenue and IT-related revenue. So the first pie chart is 2012 numbers. Notice how small IT is of their broader revenues. In 2017, so only a few years out, we're projecting that 19% of these vendors' total revenue is going to be IT-related in several years' time. And that big growth is going to be driven by SDN and NFV implementations. So that's the main cause of that large contribution increase in the IT. And all the Tier 1 NEPs are moving into IT, but they're following different paths. And we're going to highlight what those are in a few slides. So the second strategy is invest in software and services. So operators are spending an increased amount of money on software and services. Now remember, we're talking about both OpEx and CapEx here. And what they're looking to do is leverage their existing network infrastructure to tap into new market opportunities. So things like cloud, things like video, things like security. So there's a long list of areas that operators are looking to tap into, and they need help from their suppliers to enable these solutions and to set them up, install them, support them, in some cases manage them. So a lot of opportunities here. But if you boil it all down, they're using the software and services that they're purchasing to serve two purposes. And this is something that all of the companies are trying to do: grow revenue and reduce cost. So that's what they're targeting. And they're using these new technologies like SDN and NFV and cloud to enable those, the grow revenue, and reduce the OpEx. The third strategy is focusing in specialization, domain focus at the convergence of these trends. So we have the traditional net business model, which is very heavily emphasized on equipment. And that's changing now. There's this bifurcation of strategy taking place. Some vendors are focusing, and some vendors are expanding. And this is how they're addressing this market change. The focusing companies, Alcatel-Lucent, Nokia, Siemens, fall into this category. So both of these vendors are in the middle of restructuring programs. NSN just finished theirs. Alcatel-Lucent still going through the shift plan. The point of these restructuring programs, part of the reason, is to help them optimize their portfolios to be well positioned to capitalize on these new market opportunities that are coming. So NSN and Alcatel-Lucent, there's a big emphasis now on SDN, NFV, and cloud. For Alcatel-Lucent, they're also focusing on their IP business, so their routers and switches, and how that fits into this, equation for this convergence. On the other end of the spectrum, we have expanders. Now, these companies are going about it in different ways. So Ericsson is taking a smaller expansion approach here compared to the other three vendors. So Ericsson is looking to be the platform provider rather than the end-to-end provider of these solutions. So what does that mean? That means that they want to be the provider of the SDN platforms. They want to provide the NFV solutions, so the applications that are from their network elements. Whereas some of the other companies here, Cisco, Huawei, ZTE, are focused on not only the software that is going to be needed to enable these new technologies, but also providing the hardware. If we take Huawei and ZTE in particular, both of those companies have very big ambitions to be globally integrated end-to-end ICT providers. So they want to offer not only a full suite of telecom infrastructure products, they also want to offer all of an operator's data center needs. So they're making the storage and servers now, and they're also making the management tools and the other platforms that are going to be running some of these technologies. So a much broader expansion into IT, whereas Ericsson is moving in, but they're moving in from a software-only perspective. So the key takeaways of this slide is that we have Alcatel-Lucent and Nokia Siemens that are narrowing their focus and specializing in specific domains. And then we have the other Tier 1 vendors are going to pursue M&A or organic growth, or a combination of both of those, to expand more into the IT space. The common element among all 6 of these vendors, though, is that they're placing more emphasis on software and services, and they're increasing their exposure to IT. So that's the common thread here. So what are the opportunities? So going back to what we were talking about before, operators are looking to grow their revenue and reduce their cost. So there's multiple ways that they can do this by using new technologies. So on the revenue side, things like leveraging customer experience management to better monetize subscribers. That's something that can help grow revenue. Security, BYOD, securing these processing networks for mobile payments, et cetera, et cetera. There's multiple opportunities here for vendors to come in and help support these operators in implementing these solutions, supporting them, integrating them into the network, and in some cases managing these components for the operator. On the cost side, it's very much about cloud, NFV, and SDN. These are the big areas that there's a lot of talk about. And these are the areas that over the next few years, over the next 5 years or so, we're really going to see some movement here in commercial deployments. We'll see some very good business cases emerge where it can quantify what kind of cost savings can the operators actually get from these technologies. There'll be more development here. And it'll be a very important part of these vendors' revenues. So the opportunity is in selling software, so virtualizing applications, so telecom applications, and selling licenses for it, or selling custom applications into the customer base. So that's one end of the opportunities. The other end is to provide the services necessary to implement these solutions for the operators. So we're talking a wide range of services here, spanning from the implementation, well, starting a little bit before that, the consulting, which is critical here for defining business cases, helping operators to figure out what's the best way to get some of these solutions into their networks, developing the business case. Then it goes to the actual deployment of these technologies, integrating those elements within the broader network, and then also there could be some outsourcing opportunities here as an opportunity for the vendors. So very much emphasis on selling the platforms and the broader solutions to get some of these concepts into commercial use. So cloud, SDN, NFV in particular. So that's great. So what's the key to success here? You have a bunch of vendors that are very good at making equipment, telecom equipment, and selling them into their core customer base. Yes, they have software businesses and services businesses. They've been in this space for a while. But how are they going to outperform? How are they going to continue to move that needle over the long term? What's the key to success here? We think that vendors need to make transformational changes to their organizations. They need to stay nimble. They need to stay relevant. And this is going to include making changes to their portfolio and their go-to-market strategies. So unpacking that a little bit more, services and software, those organizations within these vendors need to have greater influence over corporate strategy, and despite hardware still going to be the largest revenue contributor for several years. So in order to be successful and to fully exploit these opportunities that are taking place in the data center and in other parts of the network, these vendors need to be putting more emphasis and more resource behind their software and services strategies. And IT is mixed in with those as it pertains to the data center. So again, my name is Chris Antlitz, an analyst in the networking and mobility practice here at TDR. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. We're going to open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks to those of you with some good questions. If you have them, please send them to now. We've got two in queue right now, Chris. So the first one is, I'm surprised when you say the equipment market will slow even as LTE takes off globally. How are you justifying that statement?
Right. So LTE, yes. So LTE, there is very strong growth in LTE spend. However, we need to look at it in the broader context of what is in those revenue mixes. So what we're seeing is, yes, LTE growth is very strong. However, if you look at revenue from legacy technologies, so 2G, 3G, that's declining very dramatically. So the net of it is that there isn't really growth taking place in the core telecom equipment business. It's being offset, the growth in LTE is being offset by declines in legacy technologies. So what we're focusing on here is where is the net new growth going to come from? And that is going to be driven by virtualizing the network, layering in cloud, helping operators with these new business models, and that's where the vendors need to help the operators leverage the existing networks that they have. I mean, some of these networks are very powerful, these LTE networks. They can do a lot of things that other older networks can't do. And what the vendors need to do is help the operators better monetize those assets and help them diversify away from their maturing subscription-based wireless service model. So that's where the real spend is going.
Okay, we had a question come through. Cisco has seen a slowdown they attribute to adoption time of their new cloud application-centric platforms, operator enterprise testing, etc. Do you see that as a broader trend across all telecom vendors?
So yes, to an extent. I think there's some bigger trends at work here. That's what was mentioned is definitely a driver, but I think that there are some broader economic things that need to be taken into account that are also at work here.
Okay, we had a comment, and we want to get your perspective on this, Chris. The comment was, interesting NEP see cloud, NFV, SDN as cost reduction play. We as IT providers see that as a new revenue generation opportunity for telcos. Want to comment on that?
Yes. So it is an opportunity to grow revenue. However, you need to look at it in the broader context. If you look at it on a company-by-company basis, some companies that are incumbent in, so look at Cisco. Let's take Cisco for an example. Okay, their claim to fame is selling premium routers and switches with their proprietary applications integrated into that hardware, and that has worked very well for them. So now you have a disruptor. You have NFV, SDN. Okay, now you can virtualize those functions. You can you're separating the intelligence out of those routers and switches. You're moving the intelligence to a controller box or the data center. That's a big change in how much they're going to be able to charge for those routers and switches. So really what it's coming down to is we're shifting into a commodity hardware world, and the real value and the real margin is going to come from who has the best platforms and who has the best proprietary applications to run these network elements. So definitely the sale of that software is going to be accretive, but you need to look at how that's going to impact your hardware sales and offsetting that. I think IBM is making a statement they're getting out of, they're selling part of their hardware business to Lenovo. That's a good move because they see that the commoditization in IT is happening very rapidly, and margins are not great, and they're actually going down. IT hardware margins are going down, and they decided to get out of that and focus on how can we grow our software business and make this into a cash cow business by being that platform provider and supporting the customer base with a full suite of services.
Okay. Next question. We are seeing some NEPs starting to address non-telecom verticals. Can you comment on what you are seeing in this area?
Yeah, so this presentation is focusing on the telecom operator opportunity. We are seeing some of the traditional telecom vendors branching out into non-telecom verticals and starting to address those markets to expand their addressable market. Huawei and ZTE are doing this in a very big way. Both of those companies are aggressively going after enterprise opportunities now with both their network and their IT portfolios. They are building up their channel partner base, and they are looking to mimic the model that Cisco pioneered, the channel model, and going after those opportunities in that way. And that plays to their broad strategy of being the integrated end-to-end ICT provider. So, that's what they are doing. If you look at Cisco, they've been addressing other verticals since their inception. Service provider accounts for about a third of their overall revenue, but they've been servicing all other verticals with those solutions. And then if you look at the Western vendors, so Ericsson, Nokia Solutions and Networks, and Alcatel-Lucent, they are going after non-telecom customers, but they're going about it very carefully because they don't want to alienate their operator customers by circumventing them and going direct to enterprise customers. So they're being very careful how they do that, and they're not going about it in the in-your-face way that Huawei and ZTE are looking to do this.
We have the next question. How important is the presence in enterprise cloud to a telecom vendor's success with operators?
So it's important. I think it's about the use cases. So if you guys have a really good quantifiable business case with an enterprise customer for a cloud implementation, and you have a good reputation, I mean, it's definitely going to help you when you go to solicit operators and sell them those solutions. So yes, it's definitely a help.
Okay, we got a follow-up. Any of the telecom vendors taking a lead in capturing mind share of CIO audiences and operators?
So on SDN and NFV, there hasn't really been a lot of operator movement in the sense that any commercial deployments. Right now, there's a lot of talk and there's some tests going on. I don't really know if there's any operators that are really pioneering those areas. On cloud, on the other hand, there are some operators that are pioneering and really driving that technology. Verizon with Terramark, AT&T, CenturyLink's doing some stuff with cloud with their Savvis acquisition. Overseas, there's some operators doing cloud. That's pretty interesting. So we're at the very early stages here. 5 years out, it's going to be very different. There's going to be widely deployed these technologies in commercial use. There's going to be strong business cases. There's going to be a much more vibrant ecosystem around the use of these technologies. And again, that plays into where the shift is taking place.
Okay. The last question we have in queue right now is, and I think it's quite relevant, how do you see incumbent IT providers responding to NEPs expanding into their market?
Yeah, so there's more competitors coming into the traditional IT provider space. So IBM, HP, Accenture on the services end, yeah, they're seeing more competition now. In some cases, you'll start to see an Ericsson coming in with a services play that maybe an Accenture would have provided in the past. Seeing some of the NEPs playing more in the data center, providing applications. There's definitely more competition in that space.
Hold Okay, we had another question come through. Going back to NEP revenue sources in 2017, when you say 19% of revenue is from IT sources, are you including NFV and SDN under the IT classification, correct?
Yes. So anything that is, so just think data centers. So if the applications are being provisioned from the data center, then we're including that in IT.
Looks like we don't have any other further questions in queue, so I'll talk really slow in case anybody else has a last-minute question they want to lob in before we finish up. So with that, we're going to start to close on the presentation. A couple quick things I wanted to share with everybody out there. This is the NEP syndicated coverage, so you'll see this when we send the slides out to you tomorrow, but this gives you a good look at the ecosystem that Chris and the NEP team are covering in terms of the benchmarks and the reports that you can get access to. So any questions on that, please feel free to reach out to us and ask about that. As I mentioned, I was going to share all the social media links with you, so I encourage you to follow both TBR and Chris at the Twitter handles listed here, as well as join us on SlideShare and YouTube to watch this presentation or get access to the slides. Chris got some thought leadership stuff that's up on SlideShare that you can download on this topic, and we'll be putting up additional thought leadership pieces there, as well as on our website going forward. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your time today, and thanks, Chris, for the presentation. For those of you who have asked for follow-ups from Chris, we'll make sure that happens by the end of today, and we look forward to having conversations with you going forward. On your way out of the presentation, there's a quick 3-question survey that if you have the time, I'd really appreciate your feedback. How valuable was the content of the presentation? How good was the presenter? And if there's any other open items that you'd like to share with us in terms of topics you'd like to see us covering, things we should be including in our research agenda, or any other feedback would be very helpful. We are incorporating that feedback into our day-to-day operations, so we do want to hear from you and how we're doing and what you'd like to see from us. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I'm going to leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes in case there's any last-minute questions or follow-ups that you'd like to send through, and if not, we will talk to you guys all again next quarter, so keep an eye out for other webinars and thought leadership stuff coming out from Chris and the team. Thanks, everyone. Have a great morning.